Okay, this is a piece of a story, and it's set in Oak Cliff, Texas in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And it concerns a boy who lives at home with his mother and his father, who is gone most of the time. His father may or may not be a criminal. We don't know. He never quite figures that out. He's not sure. And it's the first day of school. It's the first day of summer. School is just let out. And the principal at the school stops him at the door on his way out and warns him that an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And the rest of the story is, you take it from there. I'm afraid we won't be able to get to the end of it today. You can find it online on my website, lotuseaters.net. On the last day of school, Sister Louise's blue-veined hand shot from the dark cavern of her sleeve and grabbed Geordie's shoulder as he passed through the double doors to the waiting vastness of summer. Horrified, he stopped and looked up into the sweating nun's face, her black eyes blazing. "Just a minute, mister," she said. "Yes, sister." He went cold and numb, thinking he might be told to go to summer school at this very last moment of the school year. His stomach twisted into a hard fist. She pierced him with her gaze before speaking. "Don't you forget to go to the library every day this summer, Geordie," she rumbled. "An idle mind," she went on, bushy black brows furrowing together, "is the devil's workshop." Fear poured through him like a swarm of rats. For another moment, she kept her machine-like grip on his arm before letting go as if to drop it in the garbage. 2 weeks later, he sat on the porch in the metal chair, painted with a bucket of green paint and an old brush he found in the garage. Sister Louise's clutch still burned. Her words still rang in his head. What did she mean? He did not need to be told to go to the library. He knew he would go every day, either riding the 42 Elmwood bus or on his bike if he couldn't sell enough bottles for fare. What else would a person do in summertime besides go to the library every day, other than occasionally go to the Vogue, the Texas, or the Rosewind for a movie? Another moment's thought, and he added to the list going down to a bend in Coombs Creek at the golf course to hunt for million-year-old shark's teeth or the often rumored but never found Comanche flint arrowheads. And naturally, there would also be frequent visits to the pool at Kid Springs. It was only 10 o'clock and he was already bored. None of the options before him held much promise. He had watched a bunch of Popeye and the Three Stooges. He had read his Jack London book until he was almost finished, but saved it for when he went to bed. He needed to make another run to the library to get more, but was not yet ready to go. An idle mind. He got up and wandered out to the alley and looked up and down. He was hit by a sick, sweet, rotting smell and went over to the Conway's garbage, where he saw a pile of rotting shrimp shells and a wax paper wrapper that had been gnawed open by rats. At first, the aroma was like fingers down his throat, making him want to throw up, but when he went back in the yard, he was hungry. Is the devil's workshop. He put Sister out of his mind. After all, it was summer, and she was nothing more than a distant memory. Geordie went into the kitchen and sliced off a thick slab of bologna from the roll his mother brought home from the A&P the day before. Grabbing 2 slices of Mrs. Baird's, he went back outside. He had an idea. He went around the yard and gathered up a pile of deadfall from the trees and laid it in the bed of his old red wagon. Then he slunk into the garage and grabbed his secret cachet of kitchen matches and lit the kindling in the wagon. A fiery ghost crept along the wood until it found a clump of dry leaves and leapt into orange flame with a translucent blue core. All thought of Sister Louise, school, the library, Jack London, all of it went away as he slipped into the fire trance. He watched it swift leap from branch to branch, the smaller, drier branches quickly turning to gray ash, the larger ones becoming their own black negatives. When you're bored, he thought, there is always fire. After a while, he had a nice bed of hot coals and was roasting the bologna slice in the end of a long forked stick of pecan. He liked the way the stick started to smoke and put its own sweet flavor into the meat. His mother, Glenda, stood in the screen door with her hands on her hips and her glasses resting on her Buick-like bosom. Her eyebrows were frozen in the middle of her forehead, her jaw poised for speech. She shook her head like she was trying to get something out of her ears. "Careful you don't set nothing on fire," she yelled. He ignored her. She turned back into the dimness in the house. Next, he took the slices of bread and stuck them on the forked stick and toasted them over the embers. The sandwich, white bread, and 29 cents a pound bologna squirted down with French's mustard was hot and succulent and tasted of fire and wood and the outdoors. Since he loved Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, he decided from that day on he would make all of his sandwiches this way. When he was done, he took the half-empty Royal Crown Cola in the 16-ounce bottle that had been sitting on the back porch since yesterday and chugged it down. Sitting next to it was his magnifying glass, which he eyed with satisfaction as he now had something else to do. He went to a spot under the mimosa tree, and sitting right at the lacy edge of the shade, he began to scout for ants and bugs that he could atomize with the focused ray of light from his glass. He enjoyed the pungent, sweet, slightly vinegary aroma of the ants when he turned them to smoke. He knew from reading The Return of the Ant People that this was formic acid, which they carried in the bulbous thingy that hung between their rear legs for reasons he'd forgotten. After he zapped a pile of ants, he went into the bushes looking for bigger prey. He didn't have to look long before he found a huge jewel-green praying mantis in the old privet hedge. Neglected so long it was nearly 10 feet high between their house and the duplex where Darla lived. While he was in the bushes, he looked into the duplex yard where they had a redwood picnic table and an umbrella and lounge chairs, hoping that Darla would be taking a sunbath in her swimsuit. No, she wasn't there. Oh well, I've still got a praying mantis, he thought. He brought the mantis back to his killing station under the mimosa. It moved in an odd catatonic way, appearing resigned to its fate. He placed it in the hot sun and aimed his glass, getting the tiny sun focused in on a point in the middle of the strange green torso. As soon as the first tiny puff of pungent smoke rose, the mantis' hidden wings suddenly whirred into action and rose like a tiny helicopter at full speed straight into his face. He recoiled like he had hot fat thrown on him and fell backward into his wagon, tipping over the still hot coals onto his back and neck, which caused him to shoot to his feet, slapping and screaming. He ran to the hose and turned it on and splashed himself, all the while remembering to regain his composure, or Glenda would come out and twist his ear and make him go to his room. With the coals on his back doused, he brought over the hose to the wagon and sprayed it down. When it was cold, he kicked it hard, but he was wearing his old Chuck Taylors, which were just about worn out and smelled horrendous. They had a hole in the toe, and it was this toe that first made contact with the metal underbelly of the wagon. Hopping around on one foot, holding the other in front of him, he gave out a sharp yelp. Burned and lamed, he got to the porch and sat in the shade. It was time to reconsider his prospects inside.